And welcome back. In our last segment, we took a wide-angle look at where the midterms stand nationally, balance of powers really that are up for grabs tomorrow. But of course, every race is both critical and very different. There are a slew of races in our region worth keeping an eye on, including districts, Andrew, that normally you'd think, well, that's clearly in the red or in the blue. But maybe not this time.
You know, it's interesting. If there's a Democratic wave, particularly in the New York area, you can almost see how it will play out geographically. The stronger part of the wave coming from New York City, the further away from the wave you get, the weaker that impact is going to be. And our region could come close, if not providing Democrats all the seats they need to win back control of the House if it breaks that way, while some races in your neighborhood could be a whole lot closer than you're used to. Let's begin in New Jersey, which is the signature Senate race in the region. Senator Robert Menendez looks stronger, but is by no means out of the woods in his challenge from Bob Hugin. Menendez's lead is now up to 15 in the latest poll, and it's over 9 in the poll average. In the 7th District of New Jersey, Tom Malinowski remains poised to knock off veteran Republican Congressman Leonard Lance. In the 11th, Democrat Mikey Sherrill up 11 and is likely to become the first Democrat to win here since 1985.
And that was the Frelinghuysen district.
The Frelinghuysen district, that's correct. South to the 3rd District, perhaps the purest toss-up in all of New Jersey. Republicans pulling out the stops to try and save Tom MacArthur and his votes on health care and the tax law. If Andy Kim wins, expect that this will be a very bad night for Republicans. While the race in South Jersey's 2nd District is a blowout for Democrats, who could flip 4 of New Jersey's 5 Republican-held seats tomorrow. Finally, no polling in North Jersey's 5th District. Democrat Josh Gottheimer expected to win even after his narrow win just 2 years ago. To New York, where all the drama is on the congressional level this year. It's a tie in the Hudson Valley's 19th district. Final poll here has the candidates split by 1 point, with 7% interestingly going to other candidates. That could be a factor tomorrow. More worrisome news for the New York GOP. Claudia Tenney is all tied up in her upstate race. This is in a district that Trump won by 15 points just 2 years ago. Tonight, Tenney is neck and neck. Also tighter than expected on Staten Island, where Dan Donovan is up just 4 over Max Rose. Limited polling in this race. To Long Island, Lee Zeldin leads his re-election bid by 8, also in limited polling. No polling, but we'll be watching Peter King versus Yuba Gretchen Shirley. If there's a wave, it might just be deep enough to take King with it tomorrow. That wave will also figures to keep Tom Suozzi safe on Long Island's 3rd District, despite no polling in that race. As for the 4 statewide races in New York, all 4 Democrats, Cuomo, Gillibrand, James, and DiNapoli, seem safe tomorrow, though a late Siena poll showed Governor Cuomo up only 13 points over Mark Molinaro. New York governor only 13 points. That's still a big lead. To Pennsylvania now, where Senator Casey and Governor Wolf appear safe tomorrow. This will be the first election using Pennsylvania's new congressional districts, and 5 Philly area districts could go Democratic. And the only one to be polled, though, Brian Fitzpatrick, is just about tied with former Senate Attorney Scott Wallace. Moving south, a couple of big congressional races in Virginia that we'll be watching tomorrow. In the 7th District, incumbent Dave Bratt is fighting for his life against Abigail Spanberger. Last time a Democrat won the race in the 7th, 1968. Virginia's 10th District, just about a lock to flip. Democrat Jennifer Wexton poised to defeat incumbent Barbara Comstock. Tim Kaine also on the ballot. He's likely to win re-election to the U.S. Senate. Moving north, Tom Carper and Ben Cardin poised to win re-election to the Senate. Maryland also poised to re-elect Republican Larry Hogan as governor. Finally, a pair of governor's races making headlines across New England. The race for governor in Connecticut popping onto radar screens thanks to some tighter than expected polling. Ned Lamont has to be the favorite there, but Bob Stefanowski has been closing ground quickly. Our safe races in New England, good news for the 4 Democrats shown and for Massachusetts Republican Governor Charlie Baker, while New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, and I don't understand this one at all, locked in a tied race against Democrat Molly Kelly. Rich?
You know, you get a sense races like District 1 in Long Island with Lee Zeldin, he should win that going away. Trump wins that. But if there's a wave, those are the kind of races where they say, whoa. Like, what's going on here right now? But you mentioned New Jersey. Think about that. New Jersey, you know, for people who don't follow politics, it's almost not as much about Democrat and Republicans, but North and South. There's 2 different New Jerseys politically, 2 different political machines and everything else. When there's waves, though, you could be left with 1 Republican in all of the New Jersey congressional delegation. Who would have considered that possible a couple of years ago?
The irony is that for people who are outside the state, that's probably how they conceive of New Jersey. Is they probably think it's entirely blue.
It's blue, but
it's really not. South Jersey is a lot redder. But the tax bill and the cap on the deductions for SALT, the state and local taxes, really hurt New Jersey, really hit the tri-state, really the entire eastern seaboard, and that's driving a lot of the vote in New Jersey, particularly on the congressional level.
It's the suburbs, Dom. It really is. Like, Andrew's right, rural is still going to vote red, and city's still going to vote blue. But those suburban markets that surprised a lot of people, and a lot of women giving Trump the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, Hillary may have got the vote, but it was a lot closer than it should have been. Overwhelmingly, they seem to be voting against Trump as much as for anything. At least the polling suggests. And if that goes down that way, I mean, think about it, Staten Island. Potentially going Democrat, right? I mean, it's amazing. You're looking at a live picture of the president in Indiana right now.
And to your point, I was listening closely to what Andrew was saying. A couple of districts that, you know, traditionally go Republican, and now they find themselves in the battle of their life. And so that's why I say it's going to be a good night for Democrats. And in each race, I really believe, all politics are local, as we talk about every night, but I really believe you've got to give at least a 5 to 10% cushion for Democrats in these races. And that could make a huge difference.
The other thought that keeps coming to mind, I mean, New Jersey could change 4 seats from Republican to Democratic. New York could flip 2 or 3 without breaking too much of a sweat. Pennsylvania could be 6 to 8 when all is said and done. I mean, that's more than half of the seats that Democrats need.
National.
Add the 2 in Virginia, or one that looks pretty definite. And Pennsylvania starts to creep into that golden zone for Trump in 2016. Remember, it was Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that unexpectedly flipped and went to Trump that gave him the election. It's starting to erode a little bit, particularly in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. It'll be fascinating to see how that plays out.
And even outside of our market, there's some history or some major trend reversals potentially that could happen tomorrow. You look in Georgia and Florida, right? 2 African-American candidates for governor in Georgia and Florida. And in Georgia, the first female African-American governor in our nation's history, potentially. And the headwinds they've run into, we'll get into voter suppression in the following segment. And then in Texas, your old state here that you worked at, the idea that you could have a U.S. Senator in 2018. I know you go back a generation ago, not that unthought of, but you know, after the civil rights movement, no way, Jose. Now all of a sudden, again, Cruz probably going to win. I get it. But it's going to be close. And Beto O'Rourke, that he could win, is just an amazing story.
Well, first of all, if Beto O'Rourke does win, he's instantly a front runner for president in 2020. You talk to Democrats in Texas, and they've been saying for 20 years, we're this close to getting the majority. We're this close to the demographics changing. Maybe it finally happened this year. As to the races in Florida and Georgia, I'm curious for Dom's take on this, whether you think there's going to be a Bradley effect. This is Tom Bradley, the former mayor of LA. He was African-American, ran for governor, got huge polling boost, but people lied to the pollsters because they thought it was politically correct to do so, and they actually didn't vote for him. I wonder if the same thing could happen in those races in Florida and Georgia.
I do not believe that will be the case. The difference here is the opposition to President Trump is so strong, not just from African Americans, Latinos, minorities. I really believe that progressives, okay, so I'm talking about white voters in of course not a majority in Georgia and Florida, but enough to build a coalition with those the coalition that elected Bradley, the coalition that elected Dave Dinkins, whites, blacks, Latinos. Those are the coalitions that can make it possible to elect the first black
Obama
in Florida
and Oprah go out there. Do you think it matters?
I think it has a huge effect. I don't want to sound biased or against the president, but in those situations, I don't think it helps when the president is there, even though he's there to rally the base and support. But Oprah and Obama, people that perhaps were not going to vote will vote now.
I saw, or actually read a really interesting piece in Texas, and again, you worked there at a few markets, so I'm curious, which is O'Rourke had a rock star vibe to him, raised a ton of money, but didn't do any polling, didn't do any of the traditional mainstream candidates, and talked about Medicare for all. Didn't shy away the idea of socialism in certain respects. Took some really progressive positions, disbanding ICE. Never went there, but even, floated the idea. People hate Cruz so much, they were looking for a reason to vote against him. In retrospect, this inner war of Democrats they've been having, which is the base went along to go along in 16, and they said, see what it got us. They wanted the party to go left. But many said, just go in the middle and win, and then do what you want. Will we have that debate tomorrow?
Of course we'll have that debate tomorrow.
Wednesday, really.
But it's a fair argument. But every time you have a Pied Piper candidate, the kind of guy who you look behind him and all of a sudden there's a big crowd that you didn't expect. And you can look to Bernie Sanders for that. Donald Trump was one of those candidates in 2016. Beto O'Rourke is one of those candidates too. They get that crowd behind them in a large part by expanding the base, by making themselves attractive to people who otherwise would not have been involved or probably wouldn't have voted. And O'Rourke has done that to an enormous degree with young voters, Latino voters, and women voters in the state of Texas. And if he had gone more center and tried to play to people who just didn't like Ted Cruz, he probably would have lost maybe 1.5 voters for everyone that he gained in the middle there. So on the balance, it probably works out for the best. The danger in that is those three groups that I just mentioned, because they're new voters, you can't rely on them to turn out to the polls. That's where the turnout comes into play.
Now, if those polls, and if Dominic's right, and it's a big night for the Democrats here, we'll talk about what could change in Washington. Both sides saying this is the most important election we have seen in years. I think they're right. We're going to show you why they could be so correct here. And as usual, this will all come down to how it will impact that guy, President Trump.